Hi, and welcome to the OT is In, the podcast where we merge the worlds of education and occupational therapy to empower families like yours. I'm Sarah Collins, your host, an occupational therapist and a homeschooling parent. I've experienced occupational therapy by supporting families for over 15 years, but also through seeking out support of my own children, so I'm right here in the trenches with you. Though there is not one way to educate your child, there is a lot to consider when individualizing an education. And the goal of this podcast is to explain some of the why behind what an occupational therapist is thinking so you can apply it to your own family. Especially with my three favorite topics: executive functioning, handwriting, and sensory processing. Each episode will be packed with practical tips, expert interviews, and real-life stories aimed at helping you to create a supportive learning environment for your child. So, grab your headphones and get ready to dive in of the collision of education and occupational therapy. I'm Sarah Collins from Homeschool OT, and I'm thrilled to have you with me on this journey of discovery. Hey, and welcome back to the OT is In with Sarah Collins. In this episode, I, Sarah, sit down with Tera, a speech language pathologist, cognitive linguistics enthusiast, and all-around executive functioning expert. Tera helps us to further understand the most essential yet often misunderstood topics in child development: executive functioning. And if you've been here for long, you recognize this is also one of my very favorite topics. Tera explores how executive functioning, especially working memory, underpins our ability to learn and accomplish everyday tasks. We examine also its powerful connection to literacy. You'll hear practical strategies for parents and educators, including how to foster working memory at home, support literacy beyond just curriculum, and make use of game-changing tools like reflexive questioning. So whether you're supporting a struggling learner, homeschooling, or just curious about how our brains organize information, this episode is packed with eye-opening insights and actionable takeaways. So get ready to rethink how you approach learning, memory, and your child's individual journey, because Tera reminds us there is no one-size-fits-all timeline for growth. So let's jump in. You guys, November is the month of gratitude, and I am really grateful that you are here listening to this podcast. It's also the perfect time to help your child grow at flexible thinking. At Homeschool OT, we've created a free gratitude and flexibility worksheet inspired by Smart But Scattered and our popular What to Do When Your Child Says, I Can't workshop. It's filled with simple, therapist-backed ways to turn I can't into I can't do it this way yet, while strengthening executive functioning skills at home. So celebrate gratitude this November using these resources. Both are found in the executive functioning part of my shop at homeschoolot.com and linked in the show notes here. So remember, a thankful heart makes for a flexible mind. And now, let's get started with the show. Thanks for being here. Hey, and welcome back to the OT is In. My name is Sarah Collins, and I'm here actually with Tera Sumter. So yes, Sarah and Tera, we are here for you today. So Tera, I am super excited actually to meet you. I've been following you on social media for a long time. We both share a passion for executive functioning, for teenagers, for just all the things of coming together with our brains to be able to do what we need and want to do. So before we really dive in, can you give us a little bit about your journey and how you ended up doing this work here?
Oh, that's a loaded question. So I look pretty different. I am a speech language pathologist. So I always say on paper, I'm a speech language pathologist. My background, I didn't go back to school to become an SLP till I was in my mid to late 20s. My early education was actually in French and math.
Oh,
So
wow.
I love language and I'm highly analytical. So it's kind of this weird brain. And so I went back to graduate school, fell in love with the field of speech language pathology, and went through grad school, had lots of questions, as we all tend to do, got out, started practicing, and was immediately hit with just this realization that I didn't have all the tools I needed to help my students. And I felt like I was kind of band-aiding symptoms
Mm.
and progress was really slow and I couldn't quite figure like I just had this feeling, this gut feeling that I was missing something. So pretty quickly, right out of graduate school, I started looking for different types of education to answer that question of like, what is it that I'm missing? And I wasn't finding it in my own field. So I started branching out into other fields. So I really started diving into seminars and workshops and learning from fields like neuroscience, cognitive psychology, occupational therapy. I spent quite a few years studying OT. And I would say the last 5 years, the big field where I've been doing a lot of study is cognitive linguistics, which is really fascinating.
Ah.
So I am this sort of, and that was, gosh, 17, 18 years ago. So this is where I have lived my entire career. I've sort of become this melting pot of information from all of these different fields. Now I'm a practicing clinician. So I was taking everything I was learning and I was just developing frameworks for myself that
Hmm.
incorporated all this information from these other places where I was learning, and ultimately developed a cognitive processing model that I published, and whatever, we have a private practice, all the things
Hmm.
have grown out of this. But yeah, so I look pretty different in terms of kind of how I practice and how I see the field. But with all that being said, all these fields led me to one very specific topic, and that was the topic of executive function. And it became very clear across the board that was the foundation for learning. And if I
Hmm.
couldn't crack that and figure out what was happening at this most fundamental cognitive processing level, that everything else was just sort of building a house on sand.
So, what is your definition of executive functioning? Because there's a lot of models out there.
So my definition, I always say it's cueing. So it's self-cueing
Hmm.
from the inside out.
Oh, I love that definition.
So we have to be able to cue ourselves, to
Hmm.
direct ourselves, to lead ourselves, and it has to start internally and
Okay.
it's driven externally. And that becomes really important because when we look at a lot of the interventions that are out there, they're very external in nature.
Hmm. Hmm.
And we have to be careful that, or I shouldn't say careful, but we have to be mindful that the interventions that we're providing are providing opportunities for a student to practice leading themselves. And that starts
Amazing.
internally.
Hmm. So, are you thinking more like, how we're using the environment, how we're using all these like visual planners and visual schedules and, all of these are all external, but
Yeah,
you're
they're all
saying kind of we're missing the piece of
right.
internal
So
guidance.
exactly. So a visual tool or a planner or a timer or a schedule, these are tools. These
Hmm.
are tools that are great if we have something to use the tool. So for example, hammers and screwdrivers, these work if we have a hand to use
Right.
them, some sort of appendage to use them. Planners, picture schedules, all of these
Hmm.
types of things are tools that we can use if we have a well-developed executive function system to use them. But the tools in and of themselves are not
I'm
the
not gonna do.
intervention.
Yeah.
They're support that we can use. I mean, I always say, like, look, if the planner was the end goal, I would be the most organized person on the
Yeah.
planet. But like every year, I'm like, this is the planner. This planner is my life. And it's going to work because it's expensive. And then within a week or two, it's sitting on that pile in the
Yep.
corner of my office, right? Because the issue is not the planner. The issue is the executive function that's happening here that's getting worse as I age.
Interesting. All right, so let's dive into a little bit of how this affects literacy because I think this is almost the same, especially within, the homeschool and education world. Sometimes we're like, well, this curriculum clearly isn't working, and really the curriculum is the tool in that situation. So how does executive functioning and literacy, how do they come together?
Okay, this is actually one of my favorite topics. I love executive function, but I also love literacy. That's a big part of the intervention that we do at my
Yeah.
private practice. And this hybrid and how it connects is one of my favorite things. So it hits at a couple levels. So there's several things that the EF system has to do in order to regulate our brain to learn how to develop literacy skills. The first two skills, perception, so that's awareness of our environment, and attention. That's how well we can direct where our focus goes, right? These two orient the brain for learning. So it's the brain saying, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to
Mhm.
go. I'm here. I'm tuned into my teacher. I'm ready to go. When perception and attention are impaired or there's a
Mhm.
need at that level, then the student simply isn't connecting to the environment in order to learn from it. So you will
Right.
see a breakdown in those skills, not because it can't be learned, but because it's simply they're not absorbing what's coming in
Yeah, we're
from the
not ready. Like,
and that's how we
cannot just
learn.
make ourselves that pay attention just isn't going to work.
Exactly. And we can't learn what we don't pay attention to,
Mhm.
right? So we have to be able, the brain has to be aware that there's something there. Let's say, for example, my teacher who's teaching phonics, or my mom, right? Homeschool, my mom who's trying to give me instruction.
Mhm.
And so if I'm not aware that mom is there in the room, then I can't pay attention. I always call it the shining the attention flashlight. I can't
Mhm.
shine a flashlight on mom. And when I'm not shining my flashlight on mom, I'm not taking in what
Yeah.
mom.
Yeah.
Those are the first two steps. But then there's a third step in this whole sequence, executive function sequence. And the third step is one I think that is the most not misunderstood, but just not well understood. And that is the function of working memory. Now, working memory has two big components to it. We have verbal and we have nonverbal.
Mhm.
Verbal working memory is the ability for our brain to hold and operate on sound. So when sound comes in, so think of the working memory system like a juggler. So information, so we perceive it, we shine our flashlight on it so we can attend, the information comes in, and then our juggler starts to pick up and juggle the sound. Okay? If our juggler, A, can't juggle very much, so maybe it can only juggle one ball at a time instead of four, then if you're throwing more sounds at me, it's going to
Yeah, we
overload.
lost it.
But the bigger issue that I would say I've seen the most often in my career is that verbal working memory can't juggle for very long. So information comes in, our juggler starts juggling the sound, right? Mom's like, B says ba, B says ba, right? And so juggler is going ba, ba. And before, sorry, this I'm getting ahead of myself here. We have these other parts of the brain that are like the workers. So their job is to do the decoding. So the working memory isn't doing the decoding.
Right. It's
These are
holding.
yeah, it's holding. So we've got this phonological processing system that's going to come in and sound out. And it's going to, we have visual processing that's involved as well. So there's all these other systems, these other workers involved. But it starts with verbal working memory holding the sound, hold long enough for worker to go ba, at, right? To sound it out. When verbal working memory drops the sound, our worker can't finish doing his job.
Mm.
Perfect example of this. Has anybody ever seen where a kiddo will say, they'll sound it out right, correctly, at mit.
Right.
Something else comes out. What they're showing you is I can hold it to sound it out, but I lose it to synthesize it
Before
together.
I put it together. Okay.
So, verbal working memory is a critical piece of this initial literacy puzzle, which really establishes our phonics, our phonological processing, phonemic awareness, all of those skills that lay the initial foundation for literacy.
Hmm.
There's several routes to how literacy develops in the brain. If anyone's familiar with the dual route theory, right? We have dorsal route, we have our ventral route. This dorsal route wires through that phonological processing and really requires a lot of that verbal working memory. Non-verbal working memory, that's where our comprehension is going to come from. So that's where meaning is going to be made.
Hmm.
That's where we attach some sort of internal representation. But where I see literacy from an executive function standpoint tend to fall apart the most is with that verbal working memory. And, how do we know? Like, how do we know that it
I'm just gonna say that because I'm sure there's parents that are like, wait, this sounds like my kid, but how do I know? What do I do with
How
this?
do I know? Yeah.
Hmm.
And again, this would be hard for, I would say you need to probably go see a professional to get a, like a
Hmm.
really nice, good assessment done. But If you have a kiddo where you have been working on phonics and literacy skills for a long time and it's not coming, you have to look deeper into the system, into that verbal working memory system. Somewhere, could be somewhere else in the executive
Mm-hmm.
functions. There's way more pieces and parts to this than just what I'm telling you. But the verbal working memory is one where people will say it's like the next day we come back and the information's gone. Like they
Yeah.
just haven't held on to the sound, right? And the curriculum isn't going to get us there
Right.
because curriculum, like you said, is the tool. It is providing the tool and the instruction for how to learn it, but it's not stimulating that verbal working memory or at the level. Another thing
Mm-hmm.
that's tricky with literacy programs is that they tend to come in at a higher level of sound. So, for example, CVC. So, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of programs will come in, doing work at that CVC three letter level, and the rationale behind that is, well, most of the words that we read are three sounds. Well, that's
Mm-hmm.
great if you have a juggler who can juggle three sounds.
Three sounds. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Mm-hmm.
what if your juggler can only juggle two? And so, we're starting kids younger and younger with literacy skills. I would also say that's highly problematic because we know working memory is going to develop. Oh, yeah. I mean, working memory isn't fully developed until it's like between 15 and 17 years old. Yet we're doing these curriculums and programs where, they're expected to
Like
juggle.
10 years ahead of that.
Yeah, yeah, it's nutty. So, this idea that like the program might start here and
Mm-hmm.
that's great, but what if your kiddo's juggler can only juggle one sound,
Mm-hmm.
can only juggle two sounds, right? Should we be at a level where we have three sounds?
All right. So now there's parents that are like, okay, so I'm hearing you, and I have this curriculum because this is what, I was told Orton Gillingham's the way to go there. And that is tends to be, one of the gold standards of like, all right, let's go through phonics this way. And they're like, okay, but I'm trying. Now what? Now we've said maybe it's not the tool, but actually we need to be working on executive functioning. And they're like, well, shoot, there's not a curriculum for that. What do I do?
Oh, that's a hard question. Really having to get into some specifics.
Hmm.
So when we're talking about verbal working memory, there is one type of activity that I do love the most, and you can find it in some programs, and that activity is chaining. So where you're asking the working memory system to hold and operate on two different and hold, operate, compare, contrast on two different syllables. And you can do that in isolation at one sound, and then you can build it to two sounds. So you can also chain, sometimes these are called word ladders. It's
Okay.
where you would change one sound, cat, let me pick it, cat, cot, cop, mop. But the idea is that you're asking them to hold and operate from one to the next without letters. You could either do it
Okay.
with pictures or with blocks. And there are lots of programs out there that have that type of activity.
Hmm.
Um, there's one in the speech world. Well, I don't know if we're supposed to, I don't
Yeah,
know if
you
I'm,
can. That's okay.
oh, I can.
It's yeah, on any resources and stuff for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think, they recommend that obviously you get trained in it on how to
Hmm.
use it, but there are some good activities in the LIPS program, the phoneme sequencing program. It's like an old tried and true. It's just this like great traditional program, but the
Hmm.
change that's done in that program is one of my favorite techniques and tools to pull for verbal working memory, but making sure you're starting low enough
Hmm.
for a kiddo.
This November on the OT is In, we're highlighting CTC math because math isn't just about numbers, but also about building flexible thinking. As an occupational therapist, I see math as one of the best ways to strengthen executive functioning. Those brain-based skills like planning, shifting, strategies, and staying regulated when things get tough. There might be one formula, that we use to solve a problem, but there are so many ways to approach it. Even with the environment, you can approach it on paper, on a whiteboard, printed worksheets, through mental math. That flexibility helps kids learn to adapt and to find out what works best for their brains. That's one reason that we've used CTC Math in our homeschool for 4 years. The lessons are clear, concise, and easy to pace. When my youngest flew through addition, we kept up his momentum and celebrated the progress. But when subtraction with borrowing got tricky, we slowed things down and even printed out extra worksheets. That simple change of format gave him new space to work, a fresh start, and a calmer environment to refocus. Sometimes that's exactly what kids need to regulate and to engage with learning. CTC Math gives families that freedom to shift pace, method, and environment so math becomes a tool for problem solving and not for frustration. So if you are looking for a program that supports how your child learns best, visit ctcmath.com. And if your teen could use help strengthening those same executive functioning skills across all subjects, check out our Executive Functioning for Teens course at homeschoolot.com. Welcome back, everyone. So we're here talking to Tera, who has given us just so much information on the working memory itself. And I'm sure there are a lot of you that are like, wait a minute, I am trying to, work on literacy, help my child to hold some of these things in their brain. There are lots of different programs, there are lots of different resources. But what about, throughout the day, especially since, as homeschoolers, we are able to individualize our learning. We're also able to set up, our own homeschool day. Are there ways to work on working memory specifically outside of, just specific literacy skills?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're using working memory all the time. Working memory is how we accomplish anything. Right?
Everything.
Absolutely everything. Yes. So when information comes in, that juggler starts juggling different types of information, and whether we hold it or let it go, really depends on that juggler, and becomes an important part of how we accomplish pretty much anything. How do we support the working memory? Well, it depends obviously on what part of the working memory system that we're trying to support. I think we're supporting nonverbal working memory throughout a day can be a really easy thing to do, in the sense that we want to think about skills like experiencing and re-experiencing. So nonverbal working memory gives us the ability to time travel in our mind. Okay, so the future only exists in our mind, in our nonverbal working
Yeah.
to pre-experience something. And it's in the pre-experiencing that then we can create or establish a goal, because I can see it. I can pre-experience the goal. And then once I can pre-experience the goal, then I can create a sequence of steps to get there. Planning.
Okay.
So an easy way to do that in the home throughout the day, I would say, okay, everybody, what do we see ourselves doing next? What does the next session look like? What's the goal at the end of that? And what are our steps that we're going to get there? But doing it before you're in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Because you're wanting them to practice that time travel. And that's really sort of heightening that nonverbal working memory, activating that nonverbal working memory ability. Because ultimately what we want this very simple sort of task to translate into for our kids is, this is where I want to go with my life.
Yeah.
And here are the sequence of steps that are going to get me there. Like that's what we're training and that we're practicing. Again, executive function is developing from birth all the way into our mid-20s. You could make cases that it continues throughout our whole life until our brain starts to die in our 30s. Isn't that terrible?
I know, right? Like we're just fully developed theoretically at like 25, and then now, so we have 5 years. Like, come on.
Pretty much. And what's really interesting, there's some newer research stating that planning skills continue really peak at like 28, 29, right? So even later than we think. So pre-experiencing is a really important part of this process. What do we see happening? What do I see myself doing? So that's time traveling forward. The other aspect of this is re-experiencing.
Yeah.
After we've completed something, we can say, did we follow our plan? Did we like our plan? How did that go? Is there anything that you would do differently? And it's in the re-experience or that time travel backwards where we're accessing and activating that nonverbal working memory, re-experience, that we're able to self-evaluate, self-reflect, and learn from our mistakes. So that's all that comes from
this.
All of that comes from nonverbal working memory. And those are things that don't need to take a lot of time.
Yeah.
It really doesn't need to take a lot of time. For parents who, and I have a kiddo, I actually have two kiddos of my own who would fit this profile.
Mhm.
But, if you have kiddos who have anxiety, pre-experiencing is a really important part of this puzzle because, and support for them, because the brain, neuroscientists refer to the brain as a
Mhm.
prediction machine. It is a prediction machine. So it's constantly running simulations of what could happen, what should happen, what should I do, all these things. So when we focus to the pre-experience, then we can sort of settle ourselves to what's to come. And when we do that, we've already role played a scenario, and that in and of itself helps decrease our anxiety.
I love that. Like in OT speak, we often say predictability allows for that flexibility,
Yes.
because you're like thinking through of what could happen and already doing some like problem solve exactly what you're saying, where you're kind of role playing it through in your brain. You're already doing some of that problem solving. So then
Yes.
when you get into the situation, maybe it happens what you thought about before, maybe you didn't, but now you're allowed to, have a little bit more freedom of those choices.
Yes. And you possibly have better access of the tool of like, what
Mhm.
is it that I'm going to do? Because I've already practiced it. What's really fascinating and really extraordinary about the brain is that the brain can have a real experience apart from what the body actually does. So when we think about the best vacation we ever went on, our brain starts to light up in all the ways that it did when we were actually
Actually
experiencing.
there. Yeah.
Yes. So we can, when we pre-experience, the brain literally role plays and does what it's going to do when we are going to be in that situation. So we can teach it and train it like, okay, here's how what do we see ourselves doing? What is this
Mhm.
going to look like? What might I be feeling? What might I be seeing? All of those things, accessing all of those sensory experiences
I
with
was
the world.
just going to say, and we are also incorporating all of these senses, which then can allow our bodies, yes, to be more prepared,
Yes.
but yeah, to influence our memory as well.
Yes. And so all of this is nonverbal working memory. So
Hmm.
everything I'm talking about right now are skills that are developed from the nonverbal working memory. And our nonverbal working memory gets wired through all of the sensory experiences that we have with the world. So our brain literally generates a map. It creates neuroscientists believe it's like a one-to-one correspondence almost. Like it literally
It's
creates
amazing.
this internal map that is all over the brain. So it's utilizing, that's why working memory, there isn't just one place. When they look at working memory, it's all over the
All
brain.
over.
Yeah, because it's literally this map accessing all these parts of the brain. Because if I think about the best vacation I ever went on, I'm really triggering that nonverbal. It's going to be a lot of visual, but I'm
Hmm.
also going to feel things. So
Right?
it's going to trigger my limbic system, right? I might smell things and now I'm pulling olfaction. I might hear things. And so now
Hmm.
I'm pulling some verbal working memory, that auditory processing. I might actually feel the wind blowing on my face. And now I've
Hmm.
got some parietal lobe processing. So this is diffused across the brain. The whole brain's going to have the experience. And that is predominantly our nonverbal working memory. This is ultimately why play is so critical for our kids, because how do children have the most sensory experiences with the world? It is through play.
Yeah.
And if they're learning everything on a screen, right? If they're learning everything on a screen, now we've reduced the amount of sensory experiences that the
Hmm.
brain is having to just one or maybe two auditorily, as
Right.
opposed to all the five. We know about the five, but we also know about three more: proprioception, vestibular, and then our interoception. So all those eight, right, form what they call these schemas.
Mhm.
And the schemas become that map of the brain. And that's all nonverbal working memory,
I
which,
feel like I'd like a map of your brain inside like the majority of people's brains. Like just so much of what you're saying, you're right. Like you are pulling in from all of these different fields and making hopefully so much sense to parents who have heard like I hear a piece of this over here and I hear a little bit about interoception here on this podcast and I hear a little bit about, the vestibular system here, but how does it all come together? And you are just beautifully helping us to understand how this all comes together to be so that our kids are one available to learn, right? They've got that, what you were saying before, their attention and perception, and then starting to be able to use more of their brain to learn and carry over. Wow, so much.
Oh yeah, it's a
So,
lot. It's a
yeah.
crash course in the early fundamentals of
Right. And that's, I mean, we have,
learning.
25 minutes or 30
Yeah.
minutes, to go through all of this, but I'm sure there's obviously so much more. So for these parents that are like, all right, Tara, like you gave me like this little teeny glimpse and again into your roadmap of your brain, but I really need some more of this. How can we find you? How do we continue to learn from you?
I do have quite a few resources. Probably the best two I would give would be my website,
Mhm.
terasumter.com. You can kind of get anywhere from terasumter.com. We have a shop on there. I think it's shop.terasumter.com. And there we have loads of resources for both. Our resources are not just for one professional. My
Mhm.
team and I specifically develop them for parent, also for professional, also
Mhm.
for educator. So we have one of our best sellers is our reflexive questioning guide, which we didn't quite get to reflexive questioning today. It's okay, but it's what I always say, it's the number one best therapy technique. And we have a whole section in the guide for parents. Like, what do we do at home? How can we
Mhm.
incorporate this? That the reflexive questioning is the tool that gives kids that opportunity to practice self-directing that I was
Yeah,
kind of.
which gives, if we've got some of this awareness, then we can start to advocate, right? And then say, like, here's what I need.
Yeah. And it's a
Love that.
shift. The reflexive questioning is just a shift in how we interact with our kiddos.
Hmm.
So, for example, instead of directing our own children, this is where parents, therapists fall into this
Hmm.
same sort of muck, maybe is a good way to say it. Teachers, for sure. We direct the kids.
Hmm.
Sit down, pay attention, open
Right.
your books, right? So, when we're directing the students, they're not getting the practice of directing themselves.
Mm.
So
Hmm.
instead of using a directive, we're going to shift it. So instead of pay attention, I'm going to say, okay, for this activity, where should our attention flashlight be shining?
Love it.
Instead of open your book to chapter one, I'm going to say, okay, what's our plan for right now? What do you see yourself doing first? And again, we have a whole
Hmm.
guide, a whole bunch of resources online. So that's one good place. For free education, I post education only on my Instagram page, which is Tara Sumter _SLP. Again, you can get to that from the website. I do have an international best-selling book, which it blew my mind that this book blew up. I thought my parents and a few friends. And it's wild what this little book has done. It's called The Seeds of Learning. And the Seeds of Learning is what introduces my cognitive processing model. I do
Hmm.
spend a lot of time talking about literacy in there and the literacy network, what I call the literacy network, and the role that executive function does play in that. So for parents who are interested, you can find the Seeds of Learning. You can find it in two places. You can find it on Amazon. If you go to Amazon, you will see that it has 5 stars still after all, which
Boom.
is shocking.
Hmm.
Um, and then you can also get it on my website too. So those would be two great places to start.
Amazing. So if you had, ready, this is always my favorite question because even when I'm on other people's podcasts, they're like,
Okay.
summarize this in one sentence, Sarah. And I'm like,
Oh,
right,
okay.
okay. But if you could give us like just one for the parent who is already like has listened to this and saying, okay, I think this might be something with my child, but feels like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. I'm overwhelmed already. What is the one kind of carryover or takeaway that you can offer parents that will give them some hope?
I want you to start reflexively questioning. So first off, hope.
Hope.
There is no timeline.
Yes.
There is no timeline. We do standardized tests and we average kids
Hmm.
together and compare them to each other in this like archaic, asinine way. And we say, here's this 50th percentile. And if you're not meeting that, you're not okay. That's all bogus. It's all BS. If you would like to learn more, there's a great book by Todd Rose called The End of Average. I say, read it. It will blow your
I should
mind. It
put
is phenomenal. He was a Harvard trained
that.
scientist. Absolutely phenomenal. He talks about how we got here, how we
Yeah.
got to this place of averaging everyone together and saying, here's what average is. It's all bogus. But, anyways, this system that we have established, it just ignore it and meet your child where they are. Meet them where they are and provide steps. Just provide
Yes.
the individual guided steps that they need. There is no timeline except the timeline of your child.
Mm.
Okay, so that's the hope. What can you do? What can you do? Start reflexively questioning. So instead of giving a directive, let's ask a very curious question. Now, your tone is very important. You're not going to ask, what are your thoughts right now? Or should you be paying attention, right? We're going to do this in a curious way because we want our kids to start going, oh, where are my thoughts right now? What should
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
be doing right now? I mean, think about it. We do this as adults all the time. I walk into a room and I go, why did I come in here?
Right. What should
Right?
I do? Like, what am I doing in here? What's
This is
next?
us.
Right?
Exactly. This is us intuitively, reflexively questioning ourselves. This is not something that we're born knowing how to do. This
Right.
is something that we have to learn. And it's something that as parents, we have to model and that we have to teach. And I believe teachers should be doing this too. And it's the way that I conduct therapy, and everybody at my private practice conducts therapy. It's really that most important technique. So start, and again, just pick a couple questions. And if you want some guidance on that, I said we have some resources online. The reflexive questioning guides really our most popular resource we have. So, it'll just switch a few directives over to what do you see yourself doing? One more really powerful reflexive question that's super, super easy to implement. When your kids do it right, when your kids do it right. So they follow the direction, they hang up their coat, they do the thing, and you're like, oh my gosh, finally. Finally.
Amen. Yeah.
Yes. You've got to hit them with a really important reflexive question. How did you do that?
Ah,
How
okay.
did you do that? Because they have to be able to have the awareness around the steps that got them to that outcome. Otherwise, it could be a fluke and they're not going to give it
Mm-hmm.
or repeat it. So, in order for them to be able to execute, they need to be able to say, well, I knew I had to follow my plan, and here was the first step of the plan, and here's what I saw myself doing. But that's a really great place to start. How did you?
I think there's so much, yes, you said in practicality as far as like, I hung up my coat or I got through my morning routine or whatever. But even, that's such a good tie into academics too.
Oh,
Especially the math and show your work. And when you say show your work, show your work, show your work, and people are like, oh, that's so frustrating. But yet, if you're saying, removing that command or that demand of show me your work and then said, like, how did you do that? It changes the whole atmosphere of the room, puts you on their team, allows
yes.
them to show, and gets done. Like what you really wanted to know was show your work was, huh, do you understand what you're doing? Do you know how to make this happen again?
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. It's a great application. Oh, yeah. I mean, reflexive questioning can and should be used all the time
All the
for all.
time. All the
Oh,
time.
yep. Yep, absolutely. So terasumter.com and Instagram, terasumter_SLP. If you're on Facebook, it is Seeds of Learning. So the page is my private practice page on Facebook.
Beautiful. And I will make sure that we have links to all this specifically to the reflexive learning questioning in the show notes from here. Tara, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your wealth of knowledge.
Well, thanks so much for having me. And it was so great to be here with you and all of your listeners and watchers. So thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of The OT is In. I hope our discussion has provided valuable insights and support for your educational journey. Remember, as parents, it's essential to address our children's diverse learning and developmental needs. And here at Homeschool OT, we asked you, the parents, the most helpful way for us to support you. And the majority of you answered, time to ask questions so you can stop being overwhelmed with the noise of all these varying suggestions, some often contradicting themselves. So if you are seeking personalized guidance, Homeschool OT now offers concierge services tailored to your family's unique requirements. You can book 1 session, 4 sessions, 12, 24, whatever. It's all on demand so that you can ask the questions and receive practical strategies, heartfelt encouragement to empower your homeschool experience. So to learn more about how Homeschool OT can support you, visit the services page at homeschoolot.com. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to having you with us on the next episode of The OT is In.